However, if citizens, like yourselves, soon of a republic, lack a clear understanding of their constitutional history and its form of government, political and religious liberty will soon be lost. The unscrupulously ambitious would easily triumph over ignorance. Tyranny can only be prevented by a virtuous people who are well versed in our nation's first principles. And I'll restate, but I assume you can restate, the first principles of our American government. Its aspirations are contained in the picture you have of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, as well as the state declarations of independence. However, our political system is framed and implemented in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The underlying political theory, as I mentioned before, is sometimes referred to as the American or Madisonian Republic. Now, when you invited the so-called father of the Constitution and Bill of Rights and former president and active political strategist, etc., you knew you were going to talk about government politics. However, fortunately, Dolley will follow me and entertain you with a much lighter menu here. After serving 8 years, I then helped Thomas Jefferson found the first political party, the Democratic Republican Party. After Jefferson's election, I became Secretary of State and then a two-term president. At the end of my presidency, I came home and I became one of the founders of the American Colonization Society, an attempt to seriously deal with the problem of slavery. And then I became a rector with Thomas Jefferson at the University of Virginia. We recognized that without educating civic leaders, that our experiment in republicanism could not succeed. As you'll recognize that my service was unique in that I served in both the legislative and executive branches, both at the state and the federal level. The only branch I didn't serve in was the judicial branch. However, you students know one of the most important cases at the Supreme Court in the history of the United States involved me. I was sued, and I became a defendant in the famous U.S. Supreme Court case of Marbury versus Madison. Well, let me just talk a little bit about the lessons I've learned from my experience in political life at all levels and in 2 branches of government. Well, the first one is to marry well. I owe much of my success to my devoted partner, Dolley. You also need to be dedicated to engagement, developing the skills and attitudes which are necessary for our system to work. Our system cannot succeed without 2 important things: civic virtue and civic participation. As a diverse nation, we have many different factions, many different interests: economic, political, religious, sectional. This naturally leads to the creation of factions or interest in our society. Factionalism is embedded in our human nature. It is in your blood in every day you act that way. We don't want to force you or all of us to be homogeneous or sane, but rather we seek clashing diversity as the key to maintaining our liberty. Our Constitution actually involves the spirit of party and faction in the necessary and ordinary operation of government. We are the first republic in history to tolerate, to foster, and depend upon mutually antagonistic competition.
When my husband was elected president, I thought it was important to create an inviting and neutral social space where hostile opponents could come together and speak frankly, in privacy, and in a civil manner. My predecessors were not active in their husbands' presidencies. It was important for me to stay in the background and not get involved in presidential politics. However, I held parties where congressional wives could discuss current events. While these parties were social in nature, I was able to gain important political information for my husband. I developed a shrewd political sense and worked diligently to entertain and cultivate my husband's enemies as well as his friends. I sat with them and welcomed them to discuss whatever was on their minds. I went out of my way to be inclusive and not leave any political factions. Although it was time-consuming, I made it a habit of visiting every new member of the House and Senate. I am convinced that my weekly socials and other informal diplomacy helped President James Madison carry out his duties, as well as be re-elected for a second term.